So why should we care about where birds live? And why should we care about where cavity nesting birds live at that? Well, obviously urbanization is increasing and so is deforestation. And as urbanization increases, we're forcing these birds to have to interact with humans more often. So we should care about these interactions so we can try to mitigate those negative impacts that come along with it. And deforestation as well is we're taking out their natural cavities and we're forcing them to have to go into urban areas and use artificial nest boxes. And with no natural cavities, we're also raising that competition between those species at these artificial nest boxes. And these nest boxes are frequently placed near urban areas, so they're just inevitably being forced to interact with these humans. And if we understand these interactions and which disturbances impact them more negatively than other ones, we can try to mitigate these impacts. So my study species, we look at eastern bluebirds and tree swallows. They're both secondary cavity nesters found in open and semi-open habitats. Things like farms and suburbs, which happen to be a lot of our study sites. And they also have overlapping breeding ranges and seasons. And this leads to a lot of competition between these artificial nest boxes, especially where we live in Southwest Virginia. So box competition, limited natural cavity availability in these urban areas really increases competition. I can't stress it enough, sorry, I keep making that point. And we also see this trend for these specific species at our specific sites. So the breeding ranges, they overlap, and some areas the competition is not as high, but in some areas it really is. And just to help you visualize just how high that is, this bar right here represents the boxes that are used by both eastern bluebirds and tree swallows. And all the other ones are just, eastern bluebirds on their own, tree swallows on their own, other species on their own, and then those combinations. So the competition between those two species is extremely high. So now to talk about our field sites. The first one, and this is one of our original ones, this is Bissett Park. It's a community park located in Radford, right near the school. And most boxes are located along a trail that kind of goes right through those trees, and it's located along a river. We see a lot of variation when it comes to human disturbance because so many people come to this park, but not to every area. So it's a great place to see a lot of variation. And then Salem Conservancy is pretty much a farm. There's some research operations that go on there, but for the most part, it is a farm, and there's not many people there at all. And this gravel road is where most of the boxes are located. So the farmers don't really interact with those boxes, and there is a small meeting center in the very back that gets some traffic, but for the most part, it's pretty empty, so we don't see too much variation there. But it's nice to compare it against something like Bissett, where there is a ton of human disturbance. And then we just added Wildwood Park this year, so we have 3 nest boxes there. This is also a community park, but it's very different from Bissett. It has lots of vegetation and wetlands, and there's only 3 boxes, but we do see a lot of variation because this box right here, this is located along kind of a main road. It's underneath street lamps, and it gets tons of cars that pass by compared to all of our other boxes at every other study site. And the other 2 are located off a paved pathway, so they do see some activity, but it has great variation for having only 3 boxes. The residential area that we added is also new, and it's in a neighborhood, but it's not your typical neighborhood. There's a lot of green space. I say moderate, it's a lot for a neighborhood. And you can see this box right here and someone's side yard. So most of the boxes are located in the front and back side yards of all these places. So there is also a lot of variation for human disturbance at this study site as well. Some are like right off the road, others are in backyards where no one even goes by them. And then we have our campus area, 1 box, and it's located in a small garden right on our campus. So a lot of people will go to just like relax, do their homework, whatever. And it's also located between, I didn't mean to do that, sorry. It's also located between 2 huge buildings. So they're receiving those kind of outputs of human disturbance just inevitably through like lots of noise coming off those buildings and lights and stuff like that. So that also helps our data set. So now I'm going to talk about kind of our study design and general timeline that we've been doing over the course of these 3 years. So we started this in 2019, and we first looked at 16 different features on 28 boxes at Bissett and Salem, those first 2 sites I mentioned. Only 5 of them had sufficient variation across boxes, And then we ended up narrowing it down to 2 variables that happen to be significant in the relationship to species box use. So that's canopy cover and human activity. And we found that tree swallows tended to prefer less canopy cover, and they were more tolerant of human activity. And it makes sense because tree swallows are aerial foragers. And it also makes sense that they tolerate more human activity because where we live, eastern bluebirds come first. So they get the first pickings of all the boxes, and the tree swallows just kind of have to have real slim pickings, and they just kind of take what's left over. And it's like, do they want to spend their energy on kicking all these bluebirds out, or are they just gonna settle? They tend to settle. And now we've increased our sample size to 55 boxes, and we ended up shifting our focus to pretty much just human disturbance related variables. So then we added ambient noise and artificial light at night. And last year we didn't have artificial light at night, but we did have ambient noise. And we found kind of an unexpected positive correlation with tree swallows and ambient noise. And we were kind of confused at first, but then we were like, I guess it makes sense considering they can't be selective with their boxes. They're just taking what's left over. So our hypothesis for this year, we expect to see a similar trend of previous years, and that's that tree swallows will prefer less canopy cover and tolerate more of the other features, human activity, ambient noise, and light compared to eastern bluebirds. And for nest box use, just to give you an idea of how we kept track of all this, we had a research team, a lot of them are sitting right there, who were able to, we kind of alternated on days, and we would just go out and check all the boxes, count all the eggs, keep track of every nest, and their nestlings, which they had nestlings, and their fledgling success. And all the nest attempts by each species were recorded for each box. Our data set is pretty complete. Obviously we have some gaps, but for the most part, it's solid. So time for the results. Canopy cover, both species preferred less canopy cover, but tree swallows definitely had a stronger correlation. And this is expected. And then human activity, tree swallows had a positive relationship with human activity, while bluebirds had a negative relationship. So again, we expected this. And for noise was not significant for bluebird box use, but there was a positive relationship with tree swallows, and this is kind of what we saw last year. So again, all this is expected. What we didn't expect was that light was not significant for either species box use. And the more we thought about it, the more we realized that it's probably just because our boxes didn't have that much variation when it came to light for our boxes. I know it seems like, well, there's some in a park, there's some in a neighborhood, there's some on campus. For the most part, they were all really dark. Bradford's a dark place. And for the conclusion, so the canopy cover trend that we saw, we expected, and to remind you, the canopy cover trend was that both of them preferred less, but tree swallows had a stronger trend. And it makes sense because they're found in closed canopy habitats, but tree swallows are aerial foragers where eastern bluebirds are ground foragers, so they're probably just a little bit more picky. And for the human activity and noise trends, like I said before, it makes sense because tree swallows simply cannot be selective in their boxes, and they don't want to waste the energy on kicking out the bluebirds. We do see them do that sometimes, but it's not too super common. So for our future directions, this is a big one, and I know my title was misleading because we said that we would talk about fledgling success, but the data analysis kind of got really confusing, so we're gonna work more on that, and data analysis is ongoing. But we want to look at nestling quality and fledgling success because it's one thing to say, well, this bird will build a nest in this box even though there's high levels of noise, but we want to figure out, are these high levels of noise making it so the offspring are not as successful as they could be? And then we also, the results that I just showed you were preliminary, so we definitely want to go back and do a little bit more detailed analyses on everything and just make some more comprehensive models, because our models were not ideal, but they work. And we also want to look more closely into competitor species, because bluebirds and tree swallows aren't the only species that use our boxes. We have house sparrows, we have chickadees, they matter too. And then we also want to explore the effects of box age. If any of you have put up nest boxes before, you'll probably find that birds won't come to those boxes for the first 2 years they're up. And they do that for a reason. They like to stay comfortable with the boxes they go to. They find one, it works, they come back to that next one next year. And this is all I have for future directions. So some acknowledgements. I'd like to thank my mentor, Dr. Sarah Foltz, and the Radford University Office of Undergraduate Research and Scholarship for allowing me to travel here. And Radford University's Ecophysiology Lab, I have some of them right there. Marcel's right there, Mark's right there. Thank you guys so much. And James, he graduated, but shout out. And that's it. Any questions?